Hey, it's Mike, and welcome back to the Mystic Smoker Shop. Today we're working on the 24-inch Firebox. Of course, it's 3/8 wall thickness. It's a beast. It's a pretty heavy piece. But we need to put our hardware on the main Firebox door. In other words, the end Firebox door, not the searing door. So in this case, what I like to do, or in this circumstance, what I like to do first is put the hinges on first and then put the doorpost and the Firebox door latch on. I like to put the hinges on first to get that out of the way. That way I can hold the door better. I could snug the bolts down on the door and use that to kind of hold it while I'm adjusting the post for the Firebox latch. A couple of guys have asked why I like to put the hinges on first, and essentially that's it. It just makes putting the latch on a lot easier. So putting the hinges on is super easy. What we need to do is just get us a piece of 1/2-inch threaded rod, because of course these holes are our pivot holes, or our hinge holes are 1/2 inch, and we will mount both of the hinges on here at the distance that we decide is right, and you know, it's up to you exactly how far apart you want to put these hinges. I like to put them as far apart as I can get them, and they still look you know, scale or uniform on the door there. So I like to go just about as far down as I can go and just about as far up as I can go without getting into the radius of the tank here, which on a 24, that's not going to be a problem. On a 20, you're limited a little more by this back side here. If you notice, shoot, we've got almost an inch there, a good 3/4 of an inch. But on a 20-inch, well, a 20-inch diameter Firebox will be limited just a little bit more. And there's absolutely no reason you can't use these hinges on even an 18-inch Firebox set up exactly the same way. You may just have to grind a little bit of the back side off to keep it from hanging off. Generally, the top blade of the hinge doesn't need ground, but the bottom one does, and it still looks fine. So anyway, there is something that we need to do to this hinge to get it to work though, because remember, this hinge is designed for a radius tank. It works perfectly for this. It's just you have to do a quick adjustment to get it to work on the flat surface. If you notice here, we've got a gap, a pretty substantial gap, about a 1/4 inch. This hinge fits perfectly, and I'll put an overhead shot in here. It fits perfectly on a 24 and even 30-inch radius, but for a 20, we'll shave probably a 1/16 off the bottom third, maybe, or something like that. Super easy with sand and disc. It only takes 10 seconds at most. But for a flat surface, we have to take off a little bit more. And it's a little bit less than a 1/4 inch. So what I do is just take a piece of 1/4 inch flat bar stock and just set it down there, and take you a nice fine Sharpie and put a mark across there. And I don't know if you can see that, but I'll put a I should be able to zoom in on that. If not, I'll put a still photo in there. And I'll take this over to the vise right quick, clamp it up, and use a sanding disc just to knock that off. Won't take long at all, and I'll be right back. Perfect. All right, so I've got the radius flattened out on both of these, did them together, and that looks real good. I've got a real nice fit right there. So let's go ahead and feed the other one on. And I like to use a washer between the pieces. Of course, there are 3 pieces to this hinge, 2 vertical, what I call vertical pieces. They're the smaller pieces, and then in the center, the blade or the horizontal piece there. I like to use a thin washer. You can use, a lot of guys use fender washers. I've done that in the past. I use these real thin, they're about a 1/16 thick stainless steel washers. I just like the stainless steel. You don't get any rust issues. At least the washer itself doesn't rust, so pieces won't rust themselves together. A lot of these cookers sit outside in the weather, a lot of heat cycles, so corrosion and rust could be an issue. Just occasionally drop a little bit of oil down in there, and that won't bother you. But the stainless steel washer, I just like. So throw a washer on there, and then another washer on the other side of the horizontal, and then just take a 1/2-inch nut and tighten them down. Now the next question becomes, how far apart do we want to run these? I like to run them as far as I can, like I said, without interfering up here. And then I'll just snug them down on the threaded rod, just enough to hold them in place, and I can kind of step back and look at it and see if I like that arrangement there. And I kind of like that. Kind of like the way that looks. I can go just a little bit further, so just move the nuts out. And that just widens the gap between the hinges here, the hinge assemblies. And I'll even move this one down a bit. And on a large firebox, of course this 24 is a medium size, but even on a medium size firebox, you've got a lot of room over here that you can play with to move these hinges around. And the threaded rod and the nuts helps us hold everything in place. And I like to come off of that door band about 3/16 of an inch, maybe even 1/4 of an inch. These hinges will traverse a 2-inch door band. This is 2 by 1/4. It'll traverse that 2-inch door band easily. You could go up to 3/8 without a problem, or maybe even 1/2 inch without even restricting a whole lot there. So we get a lot of leeway back and forth there, a lot of forgiveness there. And obviously the further back you get this pivot point, the more it's going to pull that door, lift that door up and away from the firebox. It's not going to be a problem on this size door though. If it was a larger door, maybe on a cook chamber or something, then you could have problems with if you run the hinge line directly over the seam. You run problems with the mating surface wanting to come down, the seal surface wanting to come down and strike the faceplate. But we're sufficiently back far enough that that's not going to be an issue for us. So I'm going to pull about 3/16 of an inch away from my door band there, and make sure that I've got uniform clearance here, so that this edge and this edge look the same, and they do. And again, I'm looking at my clearance there, and that looks pretty darn good right there. I'll make sure that I'm sitting down nice and flat, and I am. So that looks like a good place to tack that. So I'm just going to put me a little mark right here and a little mark right there, and that'll tell me where to come back to that. And I wanted to show you what I have done to center the door before we did this. Now that I've got this kind of snugged up, we can set it off to the side for a minute and kind of backtrack. So the kerf, the saw kerf, which is the hole that the saw blade leaves, right, is 1/8 on this particular saw. And of course it's going to run just a little bit wide, so there's probably a 3/16 saw kerf all the way around. In other words, the gap between the two pieces is a little less than 3/16. And then I take the sander and I open that up and clean that up just a little bit more, so that I could get it just a little bit wider, because you don't want your door so tight that when you close it, this plate wants to hit that plate. Now the hinge is going to be pretty precise, so hopefully that's not an issue, getting it cocked sideways. But you'd like to have just a little bit of a gap between there. We're not worried about putting door seal material on this door, because we're going to run it with the thing open anyway, right? This firebox here will run optimally open probably about 3, maybe 4 inches, depending on what stack it's running in a couple of other factors. But we're not worried about sealing this door. We just want it to seal up good and look good when it is closed. Very rarely during operation will this door ever be closed. But if it's sitting around storage and all, you want it to look good and close well. So the next question is, how do we get this door centered? right? Because there's some back and forth and there's some up and down, and you want that gap, right, like we described. So I want to split the difference between my left and right and my up and down. Well, what I do is I take some shims, and in this case, it's 1/16 balsa, and I just take little strips of balsa wood because in my other hobby, I deal with a lot of balsa wood on remote control planes. So I just take some strips of this and tape them to 2 of the sides. You don't have to do it all the way around. You don't want to do it all the way around. You just do it on 2 sides. And I do it on the hinge side and the top side just because that's what I've always done. Now that will space me out 1/16 here, and that will space me down 1/16 there. So put my door back in without knocking my little shims off. And push it up and push it over. And now I know I have exactly 1/16 here and exactly 1/16 there. Put my hinges back on, get everything lined back up to where I like it. And that looks pretty good there. Get up roughly my 1/16 there, my 1/16 here. You can eyeball that or measure it. Just eyeball and make sure that we're good. Here we want our reveal, our faceplate reveal, to be about the same on either one, and that looks good. So what I have found over the years is look at it from 2 or 3 different angles. You can kind of line up down your down the threaded rod against the back of this plate. That looks perfect, and then check it from several different angles and make sure that that's what you like, because once you tack it on there, it's kind of there. And I like that. So I'm going to go with that placement there, and I will go ahead and tack this up. Now I like to tack here and then on the other side in the front, and then do the same thing. So I tack diagonal, and I tack pretty quick. I don't want time for that weld to shrink and try to pull that hinge back over. Of course, we're clamped down pretty good in our threaded rod assembly here, but still you could move it off just a little bit. So a tiny tack here, tiny tack on that back corner, tiny tack on the back corner, tiny tack on the front corner, and do this, work your way around on each of these. Don't get carried away with large tacks, obviously, because you don't want to be pulling our assembly out of place, because a little bit of movement up here translates to a significant amount of movement down here. If you're not paying attention and prepared for that, you'll get it all tacked up, or maybe even welded up and go, oh my God, why am I up against the door here when I didn't want to be? So let me go ahead and get that tacked up, and I'll be back with you in just a few. All right, so we're tacked on good, all four sides of each one of those. So let's see what we get. I like that. I'm going to pull this tape off. Gently let that down so it doesn't pull our tacks off, because it's not welded on good yet. I'll just let those fall. All right, got our spacers out of the way. Oh, that's nice. That's nice. And it's locked in nice and tight, so there we are. I like that. That's perfect. All right, so I'll go ahead and weld these up, and we'll move on to putting the Firebox latch on.